welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today I'm going to be minding my P's and Q's under the scrutinous eye of other YouTubers out there as I take a look at the 2000 movie Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows. This review is brought to us by Rotted Requester Catherine, who wanted to put this in front of me because, according to her, she's one of the 3 people out there that love this movie and wanted to know what I thought. So, pressure coming at me from all sides here, but okay, I'm going to do some prefacing of this before I get into actually what I thought about this movie. First of all, the odds were stacked against it. Right from the get-go, right from the concept, even before one single person actually even uttered the words sequel to Blair Witch, it was doomed. The whole notion of this Blair Witch lore was rooted in this lightning in a bottle that was the first movie. I made my video of laws of found footage, and here's the thing is I maintain everything that I said there. But as I was writing those laws, even though they are, I think, perfectly functional and good guidelines for any found footage filmmaker out there, I have to admit that the Blair Witch violated most of them. But the thing of it is, once that movie was done and put out there, it changed everything. All the rules were thrown out the window, and everybody wanted to replicate the success of this and saw the potential of low-budget filmmaking. Why bother with elaborate sets or DPs or cameras or anything along those lines when we can just toss on a shaky cam to somebody's forehead and let them run around for a while? But the thing that made the Blair Witch work, and in my opinion, it very much did. I know it's divisive, and that's neither here nor there. But in my opinion, what did make it work for me was how immersive it was. And I think that because it was one of the biggest forerunners out there, there had been some found footage success previous to this, Cannibal Holocaust to a certain degree, but nothing had ever done what this did, both in terms of popularity, box office, lore, the whole gamut. So, the notion of making a sequel. First of all, you can't simply replicate what had been done. You cannot just take some people and strap some cameras to their head and send them out there and call it Blair Witch 2. I mean, I guess technically you could. I just don't think it would reach any level of success. And the most that you would ever get out of it is simply just making the same movie twice. Any good sequel is going to capitalize on the lore, explain things a little bit further, or at the very least, take a different look at the same mythos. And considering how much money the first film made, making a sequel was almost just inevitable. So fine, a sequel has to get made. And I think, honestly, this did as good of a job as it could possibly have hoped to. Not only were the odds stacked against it on a conceptual level right from the start, but then we also had situations with the studio getting involved and Artisan Entertainment really wanting to push the sequel and make it fast, and the original creators of Blair Witch not wanting to make this fast, so they got put to the side, and Joe Berlinger was brought in to direct, and the whole thing was kind of a financial gambit to capitalize on the success of the first film as fast as possible to make as much money possible, and therein, not only are you screwed on a conceptual level, but you're screwed on an execution level as well. So really, what's the answer? How could this have possibly actually have been a commercial and critical success? And I maintain that that was just simply too high of a bar to reach. And acknowledging that, I also think that this movie did about as well as anybody could have asked. So on a plotline level, this movie starts out with some found footage, archive footage, documentary footage style, which presupposes that the Blair Witch came out as a movie and in meta fashion is following the footsteps of that and picking up the pieces. It's interviewing residences that are kind of capitalizing on this, some that like the popularity of the film and what it brought to their little village, some not quite so much.
Our stickmen sold so well on the internet that we started selling them in the front yard. And then somebody came by to buy them and they wanted rocks. We sold some rocks on the internet, but not as much because it costs too much to ship a rock.
In doing so, we find ourselves now going from found footage into fly on the wall, third person mode kind of camera floating aspect, and we get introduced to our main characters, which is a tour guide that is doing his first run of the Blair Witch lore, taking them to Coffin, or wanting to take them at some point to Coffin Rock, take them to the remnants of the Blair Witch's hut, so on and so forth, and the tour patrons along the way, which is just kind of an amalgam of various 20 or 30 something individuals that are there for their own respective purposes. We have Wiccans that are wanting to commune, we have a goth that is just kind of farting around and killing time, and then we have actual researchers that are wanting to find some investigative lore to take back with them, things along those lines. And then their first night, spending the night at this cabin, or the remnants of it rather, weird shit goes down. They wake up and all their equipment is destroyed. All their notes are torn into a million little snow-like pieces. And the remainder of the film kind of takes place as they're investigating what happened to them in that lost chunk of time, that few hours that aren't showing up on any of their videotapes. And of course, the supernatural elements that kind of show the influences upon their characters and how they interacted with one another and what actually went down. All right, so I've laid a lot of the groundwork in terms of kind of setting myself up a little bit here, both in terms of plot and in terms of what we could possibly have even expected in the first place with this movie. Time to get into what I actually thought of it. And what I actually thought of it was, I thought it was a decent enough flick. I didn't love it, I gotta be perfectly honest, but I didn't hate it at all. I thought it was a very reasonable, serviceable, popcorn horror flick. This had some good creepy moments. It had a few good little creepy scares. It had characters that you didn't want to throttle for the most part. It had, good camera work, good lighting. It had some great little moments to it. I didn't really find anything about this movie that I could necessarily complain about. And I think a lot of that comes down to what I say quite often, and that is people need to watch more bad movies. And I mean legitimately bad. I'm talking absolutely terrible. The kind of snooze fest films where nothing at all happens, disjointed editing, roguelike camera work, the whole bit. We need to watch more bad movies so that we can take a look at these mediocre films and appreciate them for the good popcorn fare that they are. And here's the really weird thing about this movie in particular is just how much care and craftsmanship and love was put into it. We had all sorts of hidden things, symbols, words, so on and so forth. If you haven't looked it up yet, look up The Secret of 𝗟𝗏, which is reversed. Take a look at it. There was some really intricate shit put into this movie for the purposes of not only, promotion, but also engagement. I was noticing a few of them as I was watching this. Honestly, this was the first time that I had seen this outside of the theater. It had been a long while, decades, since I have seen this movie. And while I was watching it, I was kind of thrilled by some of the stuff that I was noticing. I didn't notice everything regarding The Secret of 𝗟𝗏, but I did notice two words in particular that kind of popped up, were totally out of place, and got me thinking about it and thinking about, well, what other little Easter eggs were put in here? And considering that we're talking about the sequel of a lightning in a bottle kind of movie that could never be capitalized on again, put out by a production company that was rushing it, had nothing to do with the original creators, so on and so forth, I find it remarkable that for a fairly serviceable, decent, okay-ish movie, that there was this level of care. And I think that that is worth noting. I will not be the person that will stand up here and say that The Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 was a great film. And I'm not going to also say that I loved it, but I am going to say that this was far from a bad movie and it was worth watching, and I do recommend it. I thought this was a good popcorn, turn your brain off and just have some fun. As you're watching these characters melt their psyches away, so too should you let your psyche. I very much enjoy horror movies that have more going on under the surface. I enjoy subtext. I enjoy social commentary. I enjoy really challenging material. But I also enjoy movies that don't even really try for that and just try to have some fun characters going through some scary shit and just enjoy the ride. And that is one of the things about this movie that I appreciate, and that's one of the reasons that I recommend it. There's not a whole lot of really cerebral elements going on here, but it is fun. And so with that being said, I am officially tossing my hat in the ring as a supporter of Blair Witch 2 Book of Shadows. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you on my next review. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.